container, we have the contents within the container. So in the male pelvic container, we have these structures. And coming back to those principles, each structure in our viscera need to be in their optimal position. They must be able to move within their degrees of freedom, and they must be alive. So one sign that our organs may not be living or have a boost in vitality is that there will be a deep density. Something that is soft and painless and has a rhythm has ample vitality. So I really want to narrow in on the male anatomy, and we can see, orient us to the container. This is the pubic bone and pubic symphysis. And over here, this is the sacrum. So this is a continuation of the vertebral column and the coccyx. So I want you to see and narrow in that this structure here, the rectum, which is where digestive elimination occurs, has a deep anatomical relationship to our sacrum. If the container, our sacrum, is moving, then the rectum can also be moving and elimination will be optimal. Structure governs function. Take a look over here. We're looking at the vas deferens piercing through the bladder and into the ampulla. Notice how this has an intimate relationship between the bladder and the rectum itself. Now, if we go below the bladder, we see the prostate, which also has a continuation into the penile structure. And we can see a deep relationship between the bladder, the prostate, and the rectum within the container. And something about here is that there's a fascial link from the top of the pubis wrapping underneath. We'll see this in a different image under here in sort of a hammock. So this is what's going to keep the pressure system in homeostasis, this fascia here. And then on top, even though this is cut out, we have the intestinal loops, the mesentery, this heavy bag of life right on top of the bladder. So we're seeing any consequences of pelvic congestion can either push onto the prostate, affecting the urine stream. We could have difficulty in elimination. This might manifest into back pain or coccyx pain, and we could have puffiness anywhere around these areas. Now let's dive into the female anatomy, same but different, and the same principles here. These structures need to be in the correct position with optimal mobility and with vitality. For example, during menstruation, the uterus and cervix is able to travel 3 centimeters up and down as it's going through that cycle. If you're experiencing any types of adhesions or restrictions in that mobility, it's going to affect this uterine contraction, and that's what may be causing more cramps or a dysfunction in that reproductive system at all. This is just a very detailed example, but let's reorient to the container. We have the pubic symphysis here. That same hammock is going to wrap over to the coccyx. Here we have the sacrum, same intimate relationship with the rectum, but check out the order here. We have the fallopian tubes and ovaries here, the uterus, and that is deeply connected to the bladder and to the rectum. So this is showing that anything in our pelvic container can compress or impact the fluids going through the contents. There are 3 inner working networks of the pelvic brain, so a little bit more anatomy, but I really want to get to the juicy part. And I'm sharing this because I want you to understand the visualization that just because something is up in your mid back, T12L1, doesn't mean it has no relevance to your pelvis, because we can look, the anatomical evidence of this connection is the lumbosacral plexus coming into the inguinal canal. This was between the ASIS, the ilium, and the pubic bone. And these nerves are, we need to put nerves in the fluid box, because nerves are electric fluids. And so they're sending messages about what's going on back into the brain center. However, sometimes that feedback doesn't need to go back to the brain, and it can circulate within here in order to achieve homeostasis, because we don't need to go up to the cranium and say, hey, can we hold our pee right now? That could be something that our constrictors in our pelvis are doing for us because we're not in the right environment. So there is some intelligence in this networking. And also notice from the lumbar spine and the sacrum is that these nerves are branching out through four foramens, through holes. And in the sacrum, there are four, sometimes five holes where our nerves come from. And so there is great benefits into addressing the sacrum as a bone, as a container, as it relates to the structures. We saw that intimate relationship to the reproductive organs and elimination organs, as well as branching out into the front. So this is really neat to see in this type of view. Same thing with the principle of the fluids must flow. This is a very easy cartoon version of what's going on, but blood flow, arteries and veins are redundant and abundant. And this is designed on purpose because if there is compression on any side, there will be another artery to come back as backup. And so we need to think about this blood supply. If one is clogged or congested, the other one will be working more. And another thing about how everything's connected is that the artery and the vein are all one tube. And we can trace this for the entire body. There's never an instance where the artery and vein will dissect and stop and become. So this is a continuous flow. So this is why they say it's not shishi poo poo, it's not voodoo. If you stimulate blood flow in one area, let's say your cranium, it can relieve your hip pain because now the fluids have a way to go. So that's really neat to see. And the next one is the lymphatics. This is the immune system. And I want to show you again another cartoon. So it's way more complex than this, and everything's all packed in. But the lymphatics is deeply connected to the testicles, and this will also mirror in the ovaries. And there's this abundant supply of constant cleaning and filtration and getting rid of sewage waste to bring this back up and to be filtered into the thorax. And so we see this abundance again in the lumbar spine, in the groin here. And so when we're thinking about pelvic congestion, the first place we need to look at is the lymphatics. And another beautiful thing, as this has one tube, one system, is that if you focus on one area, let's say at the collarbone here, it will give an opportunity for things to drain back up and could relieve some pelvic congestion. So we're really not working just there in the pelvis. Oh, I've done my job. No, we need the system and these channels to be open all over the body. How are we doing? Everyone's doing great. So let's get into the self-test. This is going to be super fun. Um, Not fun if you're positive for these, but it's a good tool to see where we're at. And for any of these self-tests, if you've answered yes to any of them, even just one, you are experiencing pelvic congestion. Nothing's wrong with you, but that's why we're here to learn about what we can do about it. So the number one self-assessment tool for pelvic congestion is, can you sit cross-legged? Can you sit with your legs crossed? And if you need a stool or if you need to come higher up, then that's a sign of what level you're at in the amount of congestion that you're experiencing. So for example, that rugby photo of me when I had my first surgery was a pelvic surgery for an ovarian cyst. And after that surgery, even though I was an athlete and I was performing sports, I could not cross my legs for 3 years. And this was a big sign that I was still experiencing pelvic congestion from scar tissue and other things that were going on. So don't have to do this right now, but you'll know, hey, when was the last time I crossed my legs? And also, does it feel comfortable? Because sitting cross-legged should not feel painful. Other things that we can do for self-test is observations. When we're seeing our body around our pelvis, we're looking for purple or red stretch marks. So the color purple or red is identifying an increase in cortisol hormone. So this is telling us that we're more in that dis-ease state. Things aren't easy. You don't have a disease, but things aren't easy. And if they are more white, well, that's more of a growth or a stretch mark from increasing in size, not from an inflammatory process. As structure governs function and the pressure systems, if we're experiencing congestion in our lower abdomen, it may be difficult to eliminate, pass gas, or release fluids. and that bloating will start to occur. So this is another sign that you need to start treating yourself. And we can see this puffiness, sometimes injury related to direct trauma, sometimes not, this puffiness in the back of our sacrum, but also in front of our pubic bone. And some things subjectively, which we mentioned before, is you could be indecisive or your sex drive could be too high or too low. These are both the pleasure and the decision center. And you could be experiencing pain. Pain is subjective, but you could be experiencing pain in your lumbar, in your hips, in your groin. You could maybe feel that. Some people have a sense of that organ pain. I often hear men saying, my testicles hurt, or women, oh, my ovaries are hurting, I'm on my period, and such. And this is an objective test. I really like this because it gives you a real-time answer of what structure is going on. Are we looking more at treating the content, or are we looking more at treating the container? So remember, the contents were the organs packed inside, and the container was the surrounding structure, that functional foundation. Or is the dural system? The dural system was that craniosacral line, and it was enveloping into your head. So how this works, and we can all get up and do it yourself if you want to start here, is if you're standing from a side view, and I can see you now, if you're standing from a side view, and you can just take a look at yourself and perceive where you are in space. If you're leaning more forward, we're thinking more contents. The organs are pulling your postural system forward. If we are swayed back, so we might not be living on our heels, but if we're swaying back, then that means we are more in that container dysfunction. So a way to tell, and I see some of us swaying forward, a way to tell is if you were standing and you held your abdomen and you start swaying back, that's a positive sign that we're more in the pelvic congestion of our contents, so more of the organs. Yeah, I like what you did there. If you were swaying back and you put your hand on your back and you start to come forward, this is a positive sign that you are more in the container aspect. So it's just a neat little inhibition test to see where you are living in space and where we need to dive further in. So let's continue.